She drops her sketchbook and it flips open to a page that makes her blood freeze. Him, on one knee, proposing to her. But she's never met him. How do you know me? Pair of polished black shoes. The man stops. Chloe's breath hitches as she looks up slowly, her pulse roaring in her ears, because standing there, framed by the gray afternoon light, is him. The same man from every page, every line, every impossible sketch, taller than she imagined, dressed in a tailored coat that fits him like it was made just for him. His expression unreadable, but his eyes locked onto the drawing at his feet. He bends down, picking it up with careful precision, studying it in silence. And for a moment the entire world seems to pause, like the city itself is holding its breath. Chloe pushes herself to stand, her hands shaking, unsure whether to run or speak or pretend none of this is real. But she can't look away, not when he lifts his gaze and meets hers directly. Something shifts in his expression then, not shock exactly, but recognition, like he's just stepped into a moment he doesn't fully understand but somehow expected. He walks toward her, slow, deliberate, the sound of his shoes against the pavement echoing louder than it should, and when he stops just a few feet away, he holds the sketch out between them. Where did you get this? His voice is calm, controlled, but there's something beneath it, something tight, like a question he's not ready to ask. Chloe swallows hard, forcing herself to speak. I drew it, she says, her voice barely steady, and for the first time, his composure cracks, just slightly, his brow furrowing as he looks back down at the page, then at her, as if trying to solve a puzzle that shouldn't exist. That's not possible. He murmurs, more to himself than to her, and Chloe feels a chill crawl up her spine, because she doesn't know what's more terrifying, that he recognizes himself in her drawing, or that deep down, she knew he would show up exactly like this, exactly. Now, exactly here. Chloe's fingers curl tightly around the edge of her sketchbook, her pulse refusing to slow as the man stands there, still holding the drawing like it is something fragile, something dangerous, and for a second neither of them moves, the noise of the street fading into a distant blur, because this moment feels too precise, too exact, like it has already happened somewhere else before. You drew this from memory? He asks, his voice quieter now, but sharper, searching, and Chloe shakes her head immediately, a nervous breath escaping her lips. No, I do not know you. I have never seen you before today, she says, but even as the words leave her mouth, they sound uncertain, like she is trying to convince herself more than him. His gaze lingers on her face, studying every reaction, every hesitation, as if he is measuring truth against instinct. And then he glances back down at the sketch, his thumb brushing lightly over the lines of his own face, over the ring he is holding in the drawing, over her figure standing in front of him, and something unreadable flickers in his eyes. And this, he asks, lifting the page slightly, you expect me to believe this is just imagination? Chloe swallows, her throat dry, because she does not have an answer that makes sense, not one that would sound normal to anyone standing on this sidewalk. It just happens, she admits softly. Sometimes I draw things before I understand them. And for a moment he says nothing, just watches her, the tension between them stretching thin. A black car pulls up to the curb behind him, sleek and silent. The kind of car Chloe has only ever seen in magazines or from a distance, and the driver steps out quickly, his expression urgent but controlled. Mr. Carter, they are waiting for you, he says, and the name lands between them like a spark. Chloe's breath catches as she looks back at the man in front of her, her mind scrambling to connect the pieces, the tailored coat, the polished shoes, the presence that felt out of place on this street, and now the name, Carter. It echoes in her thoughts, familiar in a way that makes her stomach twist, because she has seen it before, not in real life, but on paper, written in the corner of a sketch she could not explain. Ethan Carter does not look away from her, even as the driver waits, even as the city begins to move again around them. His focus locked entirely on Chloe, like she has become the only variable he cannot control, and slowly, deliberately, he reaches into the inside pocket of his coat, pulling out a card, clean, minimal, expensive without trying too hard, and he offers it to her. She hesitates for half a second before taking it, her fingers brushing against his, the contact brief but enough to send a strange, unexplainable sensation through her chest, like recognition without memory. I want to see the rest of them, he says, his voice steady but no longer questioning. Now it sounds like a decision, like something already set in motion, and Chloe looks down at the card in her hand, her eyes catching the bold, unmistakable letters. Ethan Carter, Chief Executive Officer, Carter Industries, and suddenly the world tilts just slightly, because this is not just any man. This is someone powerful, someone far removed from her reality, someone who does not belong in a place like this. And yet he is standing here, asking about her drawings like they matter. She looks back up at him, uncertainty written all over her face. Why? She asks quietly, because that is the part she cannot understand. Why someone like him would care about something like this. And for the first time, there is a pause in his certainty, a flicker of something more human crossing his expression before he answers. Because you drew something that has not happened yet, he says, his voice lower now, almost like he does not want anyone else to hear it. And I need to know if the rest of it will. And as the words settle between them, Chloe feels that same chill return, stronger this time, because deep in her sketchbook, on a page she has not shown him, there is another drawing waiting, one that she has been too afraid to look at for more than a second, one where Ethan Carter is not standing in front of her at all, but walking away. Chloe does not realize she is holding her breath until Ethan steps back, the distance between them suddenly feeling heavier than it should, like something invisible has stretched and might snap if either of them moves too fast. And she looks down again at the card in her hand, her thumb tracing the clean edge, grounding herself in something real, something solid, because everything else feels like it is slipping into something she cannot explain. I cannot just show you everything, she says finally, her voice steadier now, even though her thoughts are racing, because this is not just about sketches anymore. This is about something deeper, something that feels like it has already begun without her permission, and Ethan watches her carefully, as if recalculating, as if he did not expect resistance, but is not surprised by it either. The driver shifts slightly near the car, a subtle reminder of time, of schedules, of a world that is waiting for him to return, but Ethan does not move, his attention fixed on Chloe like she has become the priority he did not plan for. And after a moment he nods once, a small, controlled gesture. Then let me earn that, he says, and there is something different in his tone now, less command, more intention, like he has decided to step into this unknown instead of forcing it open. Chloe blinks, caught off guard by the response, because she expected pressure, authority, something overwhelming. But instead there is space, and that unsettles her in a completely different way, because it means he is choosing this, choosing her drawings, choosing whatever this connection is. The wind picks up again, tugging at the loose pages of her sketchbook, and instinctively she presses it tighter against her chest, protective, like it holds something fragile that cannot be exposed all at once. And Ethan notices, his gaze flickering to the way she holds it, the way her fingers tighten just slightly. And something in his expression softens, not in weakness, but in understanding. Tomorrow, he says after a brief pause, his voice returning to that calm, measured cadence, same time, same place. And it is not quite a question, but it is not an order either. It sits somewhere in between, an offer balanced on trust that does not yet exist. Chloe hesitates, her mind flashing to the page she has been avoiding, the one buried near the back, the one she has not allowed herself to study too closely. Because something about it feels final, like it closes a door she is not ready to face. And for a split second she considers saying no, walking away, pretending none of this happened. But then she looks at him again, really looks this time, at the man who stepped out of her sketchbook and into her reality without hesitation. And she realizes that walking away will not erase this, it will only delay it. Tomorrow, she repeats quietly, the words settling between them like an agreement neither of them fully understands yet. Ethan gives a slight nod, as if that is enough for now, as if pushing further would break something delicate. And then he turns, the movement smooth, controlled, returning to the version of himself the world recognizes, the one who belongs in black cars and glass towers and rooms filled with decisions that shape entire industries. The driver opens the door without a word, and Ethan pauses just before stepping inside, glancing back at Chloe one last time. his eyes lingering for a fraction longer than necessary, like he is memorizing something, or confirming that she is still there, still real. And then he gets in, the door closing with a soft, decisive sound that feels louder than it should. Chloe stands frozen on the sidewalk as the car pulls away, disappearing into the flow of traffic like it was never there. But the space it leaves behind feels different now, charged, unsettled, and she looks down slowly at her sketchbook, her hands no longer steady, because she knows what is inside. She knows what she has been avoiding, and with a hesitant breath, she flips through the pages, one after another, until she reaches the one she fears most. The paper feels heavier as she turns it, her fingers trembling just slightly. And when the image finally comes into view, her chest tightens, because there it is, clear, undeniable, drawn in the same precise lines as everything else. Ethan Carter standing at a distance, his back turned, walking away from her into a horizon she cannot see. And this time, there is no ring, no connection, no moment suspended between them. Just an ending that has not happened yet, but suddenly feels like it already has. Chloe does not sleep that night. Not really, because every time she closes her eyes, she sees that final drawing again. The way Ethan's figure fades into the distance, the space between them growing wider with every step. And it is not just the image that unsettles her. It is the feeling attached to it, a quiet certainty that it is not just a possibility. It is a path already forming. The small apartment feels colder than usual, the thin walls doing nothing to block out the distant noise of the city, and she sits by the window with her sketchbook open on her lap, staring at the page like it might change if she looks at it long enough. Like she might find a detail she missed, something that explains why this exists. But the lines remain the same, steady, confident, as if they were never meant to be questioned. It is just a drawing, she whispers to herself. But the words feel hollow, because none of the other drawings have been just drawings. They have all carried a weight, a strange accuracy that she has learned not to ignore, and now this one feels heavier than all the rest combined. She flips back through the pages again, tracing the progression without meaning to, from the first sketch of him standing in the rain, to the one where he looks up from a glass office with that distant, thoughtful expression, to the one where he stands close enough to her that their outlines almost touch, and then the proposal, the moment that still makes her chest tighten, because it felt impossible, until yesterday, until he stood right in front of her exactly the way she drew him. Her phone buzzes suddenly on the small table beside her, pulling her out of the spiral, and she startles slightly. Before reaching for it, her fingers hesitating when she sees the unknown number lighting up the screen, and for a second she considers letting it go, pretending she did not see it, but something inside her already knows, and she answers, "Hello." Her voice is soft, cautious, and there is a brief pause on the other end before his voice comes through, calm but unmistakable. "I was not sure if you would pick up," Ethan says, and Chloe closes her eyes for a moment, steadying herself, because hearing him like this, without the barrier of distance, makes everything feel more real than she is ready for. "I almost did not," she admits quietly, and there is a faint shift in his tone, something like understanding mixed with something else she cannot quite name. "Did you look at it?" he asks, not needing to explain what he means, and Chloe's gaze drifts back to the sketchbook on her lap, to that page waiting like a question she cannot answer. "Yes," she says, her voice barely above a whisper, and for a moment neither of them speaks, the silence stretching across the line, heavy but not empty. "And?" Ethan prompts gently, and Chloe exhales slowly, her fingers tightening around the edge of the page. "It does not end well," she says finally, the words settling between them with more weight than she intended. And there is another pause, longer this time, as if he is processing that, as if he is measuring it against something in his own world. "That is not an answer," he says after a moment, but there is no sharpness in it, only quiet persistence, and Chloe lets out a small, humorless breath. "You walk away," she says, forcing the words out before she can stop herself. "That is what I drew." And the honesty of it feels like stepping too close to the edge of something she cannot control. On the other end, Ethan does not respond immediately, and she wonders what that silence means, whether he believes her, whether he thinks this is all coincidence, whether he is already pulling back from something that has not even begun yet. And then his voice returns, steadier than before. but lower, more deliberate. Then we change that, he says, and Chloe's breath catches slightly, because there is no hesitation in the statement, no doubt, just a decision made in real time. And for the first time since she saw that drawing, something shifts inside her, something small but undeniable, like the possibility that maybe the future is not as fixed as it feels. She glances at the clock on the wall. The hours slipping past faster than she expected, and tomorrow suddenly feels too close, too immediate, like it is rushing toward her whether she is ready or not. Tomorrow, she says again, more to herself than to him, and Ethan responds without missing a beat. Tomorrow, his voice carrying a quiet certainty that lingers even after the call ends. Chloe lowers the phone slowly, her thoughts still tangled, and she looks back down at the sketchbook one more time, at the page she fears and the pages that led to it. And for the first time, instead of closing it, she reaches for her pencil, her hand hovering just above the paper, because if the future can be drawn, then maybe it can be redrawn too. The next morning arrives too quickly, like the city itself is pushing Chloe forward before she has time to second-guess anything. And she stands on the same corner as yesterday, her sketchbook held tighter than usual against her chest, her eyes scanning every passing car, even though she tells herself she is not waiting. Not really, but her pulse betrays her, picking up with every dark vehicle that slows even slightly. The air feels sharper today, colder, and she shifts her weight from one foot to the other, her breath visible in faint clouds as minutes stretch longer than they should. And for a brief moment doubt creeps in, quiet but persistent. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe last night was just curiosity that faded with sleep. Maybe this was always meant to end before it even began. Then the familiar black car appears, smooth and deliberate as it pulls up to the curb, and Chloe's chest tightens, not from surprise, but from the realization that he meant it, that he came back. Exactly like he said he would. The door opens and Ethan steps out, his presence immediately shifting the space around him. Controlled, composed, but there is something else now, something less distant than before, something that feels like focus directed entirely at her. And when his eyes meet hers, there is no hesitation, only recognition. You are here, he says simply. And Chloe lets out a breath she did not realize she was holding, nodding once. So are you, she replies, her voice steadier than she expected, and for a second, there is the faintest hint of something almost like a smile at the corner of his lips, gone as quickly as it appears. He gestures slightly toward the car, not commanding, but inviting. Come with me, he says, and Chloe hesitates, just for a fraction of a second, her gaze flicking from him to the car, to the driver waiting patiently, to the world she knows on this side of the sidewalk, and then back to him. Because stepping into that car means stepping into something she cannot fully control, something that might already be written in the pages she carries. Just to talk, he adds, as if reading the hesitation, his tone calm but deliberate, and Chloe nods slowly, because she knows she cannot stay in the same place forever, not after yesterday, not after everything she has seen. She moves toward the car, her steps measured, her fingers tightening slightly around her sketchbook as she slides into the seat, the door closing behind her with a soft, final sound that feels like crossing a line she cannot uncross. The interior is quiet, insulated from the noise outside, the city fading into a distant blur as the car begins to move, and Chloe glances out the window, watching the familiar streets shift into something else, something cleaner, taller, more distant from the life she knows, until finally she looks back at Ethan, who is already watching her, not with suspicion this time, but with something closer to intent. Show me, he says, his voice lower now, more focused, and Chloe swallows, her fingers slowly opening the sketchbook on her lap, flipping past the earlier pages, the ones he has not seen yet, each one revealing a piece of him, moments captured without his knowledge, expressions he cannot deny, until she reaches the one she knows he is waiting for. She pauses, her hand hovering just above the page, her heart pounding louder in her ears, and for a second she considers stopping, closing the book, pretending this part does not exist, but she already knows that will not change anything. She turns the page. The drawing is exactly as she remembers, Ethan standing at a distance, his back turned, the space between them wide and final, and the car feels smaller suddenly, the air heavier as silence settles in, thick and unavoidable. Ethan does not react immediately, his gaze fixed on the image, taking it in, with a precision that mirrors the way she drew him, and Chloe watches him carefully, searching for something, disbelief, rejection, anything that tells her this is just a coincidence. But what she sees instead is something else entirely, something controlled but undeniable, like recognition meeting resistance. "This is what you think will happen," he says finally, not a question, not an accusation, just a statement placed carefully between them, and Chloe shakes her head slightly, her voice quiet but firm. "It is not what I think," she says, "it is what I saw." And the distinction matters more than she can explain. Ethan leans back slightly, his eyes still on the drawing, his jaw tightening just enough to reveal the shift beneath his composure. And for the first time, the certainty that defines him seems to meet something it cannot immediately solve. "Then it is wrong," he says after a moment, his tone sharper now, not out of anger, but out of refusal, like he is rejecting the outcome itself, and Chloe feels a small, unexpected flicker in her chest at that, because it is not dismissal, it is defiance. The car continues moving through the city, but inside, everything feels suspended, balanced on the edge of a future that may or may not exist. And as Chloe looks down at the sketchbook again, at the lines she drew without understanding, she realizes something she has not allowed herself to consider before. If this ending is only one version, then there might be another one she has not drawn yet. The silence inside the car lingers longer than Chloe expects, stretching into something almost tangible, like the space between two decisions that have not been made yet. And she watches Ethan carefully, searching his face for any sign that he will dismiss it, laugh it off, call it coincidence. But he does not. Instead, he studies the drawing with a focus that feels unsettling in its intensity, as if he is not just looking at lines on paper, but at a possibility he refuses to accept. "You said these happen," he finally says, his voice calm, but edged with something firmer now, something that sounds like control tightening around uncertainty. "The things you draw, they come true." And Chloe shifts slightly in her seat, her fingers brushing the edge of the page. "Not always exactly," she admits, her voice quiet but honest. "Sometimes they change, small details, timing, but the core, it finds a way." And saying it out loud makes it feel heavier, more real than she wants it to be. Ethan exhales slowly, leaning back just enough to create distance between himself and the drawing, but not enough to break from it entirely. And for the first time, Chloe sees something beneath the surface of his composure, not fear exactly, but something close. Something like the realization that this is not a problem he can solve with logic alone. "Then we do not follow it," he says after a moment, his tone more decisive now, like he has reached a conclusion he intends to stand by. And Chloe tilts her head slightly, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. "You think it is that simple?" she asks, not challenging him, but genuinely curious, because if it were that easy, she would have done it already. He meets her gaze directly, unwavering. "I think it is a choice," he replies, and there is something in the way he says it that makes her pause, because it is not denial, it is conviction, the kind that comes from someone who is used to shaping outcomes, not reacting to them. The car slows as it turns into a quieter street, lined with glass buildings that reflect the gray sky above, and Chloe glances out the window, recognizing none of it, feeling the distance from her world more clearly with every passing second, until the car finally stops in front of a towering structure that seems to disappear into the clouds, its surface sleek and untouchable. "Where are we?" she asks softly, even though the answer is already forming in her mind, and Ethan follows her gaze upward. "My office," he says simply, as if that explains everything, and in a way, it does. The driver steps out to open the door, and Chloe hesitates again, the weight of her sketchbook suddenly heavier in her hands, because stepping out here means stepping deeper into his world, into a place where everything is controlled, structured, predictable, the complete opposite of whatever is happening between them. Ethan steps out first, then turns slightly, offering her the same quiet invitation as before, not forcing, not pulling, just waiting, and Chloe takes a slow breath before following, her feet touching the polished pavement as she looks up at the building, its height almost overwhelming. Inside, everything is quieter, cleaner, the air conditioned and still, the floors reflecting light in a way that makes every step feel louder than it should, and people move with purpose, their conversations hushed, their attention briefly flickering toward Ethan as he passes, recognition immediate but restrained. Like they understand who he is without needing to say it. Chloe walks beside him, aware of every detail, every difference from the world she left behind just minutes ago, and yet none of it feels as overwhelming as the sketchbook in her hands, the pages inside it carrying more weight than everything around her combined. They step into a private elevator, the doors sliding shut with a soft, final sound, and for a moment it is just the two of them again, the outside world cut off completely, and Ethan turns slightly toward her, his expression focused, steady, like he has already decided the next step. If this is real, he says, his voice lower now, more contained. Then we test it. And Chloe's breath catches slightly, her grip tightening instinctively. Test it? She repeats, unsure if she wants to hear the answer, and Ethan nods once, deliberate. You draw something new, he says, something small, something controlled, and we see if it happens, and the idea settles between them. Simple on the surface, but heavy with implication, because if he is right, it proves control, but if he is wrong, it proves something else entirely. Chloe looks down at her sketchbook, her mind racing through possibilities, through outcomes she cannot fully predict, and for the first time, the question is not just what she has already drawn, but what she is about to create. Because whatever she puts on that page next might not just reveal the future, it might shape it. The elevator doors slide open with a soft chime, revealing a space that feels almost unreal in its precision, glass walls stretching from floor to ceiling, the city laid out beneath them like a living map, every movement below distant and insignificant, and Chloe steps out slowly, her grip tightening around her sketchbook as if it is the only thing anchoring her to something familiar. Ethan walks ahead with quiet confidence, but not once does he lose awareness of her presence behind him, his pace adjusting just enough to keep her close without making it obvious. And when they reach his office, he gestures toward the wide desk, clear, organized, controlled in a way that mirrors everything about him. Here, he says, pulling a chair slightly away from the desk, offering it to her, and Chloe hesitates before sitting, the smooth leather unfamiliar beneath her, the silence of the room heavier than any noise outside, because this is where decisions are made, where outcomes are shaped, and now somehow, her sketchbook has become part of that equation. Ethan moves to the other side, but instead of sitting, he leans lightly against the desk, his attention fixed entirely on her, his expression steady, waiting, something small, he reminds her, his voice calm but focused, and Chloe nods slowly, her fingers opening the sketchbook, flipping past the pages that now feel like pieces of a puzzle she does not fully understand, until she finds a blank page, untouched, waiting. The pencil in her hand feels different now, heavier, like it carries more responsibility than it ever has before, and for a moment she just stares at the empty space, her mind racing through possibilities, through outcomes, through the weight of what it means to choose what comes next. It does not always work when I try to force it, she admits quietly, her eyes still on the page, and Ethan's response is immediate, but softer than before. Then do not force it, he says, just draw. And there is something in the simplicity of that steadies her, something that reminds her of how this always begins, not with control, but with instinct. Chloe exhales slowly, letting her hand move before her mind can catch up, the pencil touching paper with a faint, familiar sound, and at first the lines are uncertain, light, searching, but then they begin to take shape, guided by something she cannot explain, something that feels like recognition rather than creation. Ethan watches in silence, his focus unbroken, his eyes tracking every movement of her hand, every line that appears, and the room seems to narrow around that single point of contact between graphite and paper. Minutes pass, though it feels like less, and when Chloe finally stops, her breath catches slightly as she looks down at what she has drawn. It is simple, controlled, exactly what he asked for, a coffee cup resting on the edge of his desk, tilted just enough that it looks like it is about to fall, the liquid inside frozen in the moment before it spills. Chloe lifts her gaze slowly to meet his, uncertainty flickering across her face. That is it, she says, her voice quiet, almost questioning, and Ethan nods once, pushing himself off the desk as he steps closer, his eyes moving from the drawing to the actual desk beside him, where a pristine white cup sits exactly as it has been since they entered the room. For a moment, nothing happens, the stillness stretching, testing patience, testing belief, and Chloe feels her heartbeat begin to rise. Because this is the moment, the one that either proves everything or breaks it apart completely. Ethan does not move, does not touch the cup, his hands resting at his sides, his gaze fixed, waiting, and then, almost imperceptibly at first, the cup shifts. It is small, subtle, a fraction of an inch, but enough that both of them see it, enough that the balance changes, and Chloe's breath catches sharply as the cup tilts. Just like in the drawing, the edge lifting, the liquid inside moving with it. And then it tips. The coffee spills across the smooth surface of the desk, dark against the polished finish, spreading exactly the way she imagined it, exactly the way she drew it. And for a second, the world narrows to that single moment, the sound of liquid, the sight of something impossible becoming real. Ethan reacts instantly, grabbing a cloth from the side, wiping the spill with controlled efficiency. But there is no frustration in the movement, no irritation at the mess, only focus, only confirmation, and when he looks back at her, something has changed, something deeper than curiosity, deeper than skepticism, something that settles into certainty. Again, he says, his voice lower now, more intense, and Chloe feels a chill run through her, because it worked, not just once, not just by chance, but exactly as he said, exactly as she feared. And now the question is no longer whether it is real, but how far it can go. The word hangs in the air between them, quiet but heavy, and Chloe feels it settle somewhere deep in her chest as she looks down at the page, then back at the coffee stain still spreading faintly across the polished desk, the proof impossible to ignore. And for the first time, the idea of drawing something new does not feel like curiosity, it feels like consequence. No, she says softly at first, almost to herself, but then she lifts her head, meeting Ethan's gaze with a steadiness she did not have before. We should not do that again. And there is no fear in her voice now, only a clear understanding of what just happened and what it could mean if they push it further. Ethan does not respond immediately, his eyes studying her carefully, as if weighing the shift in her tone, the change in her posture, and for a moment it feels like the balance between them has tilted, not in power, but in awareness. We just proved it works, he says after a second, his voice controlled. But there is an edge beneath it now, something sharper, something driven. That gives us leverage. And Chloe shakes her head slowly, her fingers tightening around the sketchbook as if it might slip away from her if she loosens her grip. It gives us responsibility, she replies, and the distinction lands differently, heavier, because it reframes everything. Ethan's jaw tightens slightly, not in anger, but in resistance. Because responsibility is not a variable he usually has to negotiate, it is something he defines on his own terms. And yet here, with her, with this, it feels different. Chloe stands slowly, the chair moving back with a soft sound that echoes louder than it should in the quiet room. And she takes a step away from the desk, needing space, needing distance from the place where something impossible just became real. And she looks out at the city beyond the glass walls, the endless motion below suddenly feeling fragile. Like everything could shift with a single line of graphite. If I draw something bigger, she continues, her voice quieter now, but no less firm. Something that affects more than just a cup. What happens then? And she does not need him to answer, because the question itself carries the weight of the unknown. Ethan moves slightly, closing the distance between them, but not enough to crowd her, just enough to make his presence felt, steady, grounding in a way she did not expect. And when he speaks again, his tone has changed. Less force, more intention. Then we choose carefully, he says, and there is something in that word, choose, that echoes what he said before, but now it sounds different, less like control, more like awareness. Chloe turns to face him fully, her eyes searching his, because she needs to know if he understands what she is saying, not just intellectually, but completely, and for a moment, they stand there in silence, the space between them filled with everything they are not saying out loud. There is another drawing, she admits finally, the words coming slower now, more deliberate, and Ethan's focus sharpens instantly, not surprised, but ready. The one you told me about, he says, not asking, and Chloe nods, her gaze dropping briefly to the sketchbook before lifting again. It is not just an ending, she continues. It feels like a choice, one that has already been made. And saying it out loud makes it feel more real than she wants it to be. Ethan exhales slowly, his eyes flickering with something deeper now, something that is not just analysis, not just strategy, but something closer to understanding the stakes beyond logic. And when he speaks again, his voice is quieter, more measured. Then we change that one, he says, and this time it is not defiance, not immediate rejection. It is something steadier, something built on what they have already seen. Chloe's breath catches slightly, because the idea is both simple and overwhelming at the same time, changing a moment that feels inevitable, rewriting something that already exists on paper, and for the first time, the sketchbook in her hands does not feel like a record of what will happen, but a tool that might reshape it. She opens it again slowly, flipping through the pages with more intention now, each drawing no longer just a glimpse, but a possibility, until she reaches the one that has been waiting, the one she has avoided, and she pauses, her fingers hovering just above it, her heart pounding in her chest. Ethan steps closer, just enough to see, his presence steady beside her, and for a second, neither of them moves. Because this is not like the others, this is not small, not controlled, this is the moment that defines everything that comes after. Chloe turns the page. The image stares back at them, unchanged, undeniable. Ethan walking away. The distance final, the connection broken, and the room feels quieter than ever, like even the city outside has paused to watch. This is the one, she whispers, her voice barely audible, and Ethan studies it, his expression unreadable for a moment, before something shifts, something settles. And when he looks at her again, there is no hesitation left, only a decision. Then draw it again, he says, his voice low but certain. But this time, do not let me leave. The words settle between them with a quiet weight that feels heavier than anything Chloe has heard before. And for a moment she does not move, her fingers still hovering over the page as if crossing that final inch will change something permanent, something she cannot undo. And she looks at Ethan, really looks at him, searching for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that might tell her to stop, but there is none. Only that steady certainty in his eyes, not demanding, not controlling, just present, as if he is choosing to stand in this moment with her instead of shaping it alone. Do not let me leave, she repeats softly, the words echoing in her mind as something both simple and impossibly complex. And her grip tightens slightly on the pencil, because this is no longer about observing. It is about deciding, and she has never decided something like this before. The room feels still, the city beyond the glass reduced to silent movement, and Chloe lowers her gaze back to the sketchbook, to the image that has already been drawn, the version of the future that feels fixed, and for a brief second fear flickers through her chest, because what if changing it breaks something else? What if every line carries consequences she cannot see yet? But then she remembers the coffee cup, the small shift that proved choice exists, and she exhales slowly, letting that thought settle. Her hand moves. The pencil touches the paper again. But this time it is different, not guided by something unknown, not pulled by instinct alone, but directed, intentional. And the first line she draws cuts across the existing image, subtle but deliberate, altering the angle of his stance, shifting the direction of his movement. And she pauses for just a second, her heart pounding, before continuing, her strokes growing steadier, more confident, as if the act itself is rewriting something deeper than the page. Ethan does not speak, does not interrupt, but his presence is constant beside her, his focus unwavering. And as Chloe works, the drawing begins to change, not drastically, not all at once, but piece by piece, the distance between them shrinking, the line of his shoulders no longer turned away completely, the space between his steps narrowing until finally, she draws the moment where he stops. Her breath catches as she adds the final detail, his head slightly turned, not fully facing her yet, but no longer leaving, suspended in a moment that could go either way. and when she lifts the pencil. The silence in the room feels louder than ever, like the world itself is waiting. For a second, nothing happens. Chloe's eyes flick up to Ethan's, searching, uncertain, and then something shifts, not on the page, but in the space between them. Ethan takes a step. It is small, almost imperceptible, but Chloe notices immediately, because it is not toward the door, not away from her, but closer, closing the distance that did not exist a moment ago, and her breath catches again, sharper this time. Because this is not coincidence, this is response. He stops just within reach, his gaze steady on hers. And there is something different now, something that was not there before, like the certainty he carries has met something equal, something that does not bend to control, but does not resist connection either. You changed it, he says quietly, not questioning, just acknowledging, and Chloe nods slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I tried. She replies, because even now she is not sure if this is enough, if this version will hold, if the future will follow this line instead of the other. Ethan's gaze softens just slightly, not losing its strength, but gaining something else, something warmer, more human. And for the first time since this began, the tension between them shifts into something that feels less like uncertainty and more like possibility. He glances briefly at the sketchbook, at the altered image, then back at her, and there is a quiet understanding in the space between those two looks, like he recognizes what she risked in changing it, what it means to choose a different outcome when the original felt inevitable. Then we keep choosing, he says, his voice low but steady, and Chloe feels something in her chest respond to that, something that has been uncertain until now, because this is not about one drawing anymore. It is about every moment that follows, every choice that builds on the last. She looks down at the page one more time, at the version of them that no longer ends in distance, but pauses on the edge of something unresolved, something open, and for the first time, that uncertainty does not feel like fear, it feels like space. Chloe closes the sketchbook slowly, her fingers lingering on the cover for a second longer than necessary, because she understands now that what is inside it is not just a glimpse of what will happen, but a reflection of what could happen, shaped by every line she chooses to draw. When she looks back up, Ethan is still there, exactly where the new version placed him, not walking away, not leaving, just present, and the quiet between them is no longer empty. It is filled with something unspoken but undeniable, something that has not fully formed yet,